Hi, Jeff.
Hi, guys. Yeah, working up a sweat, just keeping up with all that the Vancouver Canucks did over the last, 24, 36 hours. And as you said, more to come. That was just the appetizer, I think.
Yeah.
Proof that the lack of news doesn't mean there won't be news, right? I mean, all this stuff came without any smoke signals whatsoever.
And that's the way Patrick Allvin likes to operate. But it also tells you that, so often in these negotiations, you need the deadline. You need the trigger point to get both sides back to talking and making something happen that, they can volley back and forth for weeks, but that deadline is looming. And so ultimately, that was, I think, the flashpoint that made a lot of this happen here in the last day or so.
I would disagree, Blake. I think the smoke signal was they were trying to move Mikheyev. And then from there, I think it's a very orderly follow the breadcrumbs. They got rid of the Mikheyev salary.
Clearly the negotiations
to be
were
able to
happening with the other
re-sign
guys.
Blueger, to be able to re-sign. Yeah, no, I
and
understand
there was no reports of any negotiations with any of these players.
Well,
though.
I mean, you're always talking to your own free agents. So anyways, let's not quibble about that. Hey, let's address this because, I mean, this is a seminal moment for the Vancouver Canucks franchise. A thought or two, Jeff, about Quinn Hughes winning the Norris, and everybody seems to love the speech he made as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised. I didn't have a vote, but he would have had mine certainly, and I expected him fully to win. What I wasn't sure about with all the discourse in the hockey channels was how wide a gap was it ultimately going to be, and was it Quinn versus Cale? And as it turned out, no, it wasn't, not by a long shot there, but I'm glad to see that the voters got it right. I mean, this was a landslide for Quinn Hughes, 92 points. He has left that all-Canadian division in the dust now, the 1 year that he, was saddled with the minus 24, and I think that stuck with him, and it certainly stuck in his craw. I mean, you've heard him reference it an awful lot to prove people wrong. This is a guy that wants to be the best, and at least now we have proof that for this past season, there was no better defenseman in the National Hockey League. Great moment for the family, the hugs with the brothers before the parents, in fact. And then, a speech that touched on a lot of the right notes. And again, I think another indication that this year of being captain of the Vancouver Canucks wasn't a burden for him. He embraced the role, the opportunity, seemed to learn and grow as the season went along. It didn't affect his on-ice performance, and I think it has built up his off-ice performance as well to the point that he's now just, a remarkable young guy, and hopefully there's more Norris trophies in his future, but hopefully he's now entrenched in the conversation for the next bunch of years.
Well, it's quite a class of defenseman that he's got, and everybody's got one. Miro Heiskanen doesn't, right? He's the only guy of this young superstar.
Rasmus Dahlin isn't there yet either, but
right. So, but he'll be knocking on the door. So there's two other young guys coming, but the Makars and Foxes of the world, and Yossi obviously. So, I mean, you want to say he's going to get another one, Jeff, but man, is there a lot of good competition right now.
Sure, and you look at Cale Makar, who probably will get another one or two or three, but he had a slightly off year by his own standards, and in this competitive class, you just can't afford to do that if you think that, you're truly going to be in the running. So he was a finalist, but a distant finalist as it turned out. This is a golden age of just incredible, transformative, puck-moving defensemen who are sort of revolutionizing the position, not afraid to get up ice because they all skate so well that they can get back into position and defend. So you're right. But I think now, you win one, you separate yourself a little bit. And I think he's now put himself on the radar that if there were still doubters, all doubt should be removed. And yes, Quinn Hughes should start every season in his prime as a legitimate contender to add to his Norris collection.
Well, you guys, first of all, I'm just glad the Canucks can put the never had a Norris Trophy winner discussion to bed, right? That had been raging for 50 more years. And this young crop of defensemen you speak of is only going to get deeper tonight after some of these first round picks go. Salayev, Levshunov, Buim, and Parekh look like an outstanding class of first round defensemen here tonight at the NHL draft. Let's move on. Jeff, I saw you tweeting about this. Hey, Hughes and Elias Pettersson forever linked. And Elias not amongst the initial 6 members of the Swedish Four Nations team that was announced today. Erik Karlsson, Gustav Forsling, Philip Forsberg, Mika Zibanejad, William Nylander. Sorry, make that 5, not 6. I saw you tweet. A little bit surprising there, huh?
Just based on the numbers. numbers alone, Elias Pettersson was third in the National Hockey League among all Swedes in both goals and points this past season, second or third only to William Nylander and Philip Forsberg. And if you go back the last 2 seasons, so we're looking at a body of work that speaks to recent form, includes Pettersson's 102-point season. He's been the most productive Swede in the National Hockey League. I get what happened down the stretch from the All-Star break in through the playoffs. I understand that. We followed it. I was there every single day. And I have to think that the Swedish Federation saw those same things. I mean, that's the only way that I can read this. Look, you release 6 names, there's always going to be some snubs. He will be on this team. He'll be a big part of this team. There's every reason to believe that he could be the standout and the lead dog for the Swedes. But he didn't make the initial 6. And I think that in and of itself is notable, certainly. And I didn't know beforehand whether it was going to be just 6 players at random or if it was going to be a goalie, 2 defensemen, and 3 forwards. Either way, I still thought that Elias Pettersson would have had one of the spots in the first 6 for the Swedes. Just like I thought there was an outside chance. JT Miller, like, only Austin Matthews had more points among American players than JT Miller last season. Now, did I think realistically that JT Miller would be one of the first 6? No, but I think on recent form, and I think a tournament like this one should be about recent form. You want guys that are absolutely going. So I thought there was an outside chance. I was glad to see Quinn Hughes, so the Canucks are represented there. But the Pettersson one is interesting to me. We know this, like, he's a perfectionist. He doesn't like to be upstaged by other players. He doesn't like to talk about other players in the National Hockey League. He's going into a contract that should be all the motivation in the world to get back on his game. But if this is considered a snub, if this can be a chip on his shoulder, if this can be fuel for him, hey,
yeah, by all means.
maybe there's a benefit to the Vancouver Canucks.
Now, it was 6, not 5. I forgot Victor Hedman.
Who's the youngest guy in that group? Willie Nylander, or 28? So they went with elder statesman. Maybe Gustav Forsling's younger than that. It's pretty clear that they just went with the veteran guys that they know at this level pretty well. Forsling's 28 as well. Yeah. So those 2 guys.
Let's move on to the Canucks and some of these re-signings. Jeff, we'll start with the most recent, but Tyler Myers, I saw your tweet, and that you, like everyone else, don't love this contract as much as perhaps some of the other ones.
Look, and I want to be perfectly clear here. I have all the world of respect for Tyler Myers, the person, and I'm here to give Tyler Myers flowers for the season that he just had in the final year of his contract. I just was surprised that this group, this management group, which has shown itself to be ruthless and to use leverage. You had a player that had gone on the record. He only wanted to play for the Vancouver Canucks. And as a guy that is 34 going on 35 in season, I was surprised. I was surprised that he was able to get a 3rd year on the deal. Now, I understand bringing the average annual value down and all of that kind of stuff. But I also know that if you don't resign a player, there's no annual average value here. And maybe the opportunity cost is, could those $3 million be spent better in years 2 and years 3? Now, Tyler Myers under Rick Tocchet and Adam Foote, the redemption arc has been incredible. How many people in this market have been counting down the days to July 1st, 2024 for years when the Canucks would be out from under Tyler Myers and his contract, and now he's back for 3 more years, and it seemed to be universally regarded in the market. So a turn of events certainly that I didn't see coming for most of the years of the Myers deal. Now it's at half the rate. I understand that part too. I just thought, like, they signed Ian Cole as a 34-year-old going on 35 to a 1-year deal last summer, and we saw Ian Cole's performance sort of taper as the year went along. So when I said there was risk, I mean, there's risk in every contract, obviously. But I was looking at this. There were 10 defensemen in the National Hockey League over the age of 35 last year. And in that group, Mark-Edward Vlasic, Mark Stahl, Alex Goligoski, Ryan Suter, who played but is going to get bought out by the Dallas Stars because they don't think that there's a whole lot left there. Time catches up to everybody at some point, but this is a player that's wildly popular in the locker room with his teammates, leadership qualities. I think they can get something out of him again next year. But beyond that, I do think that there is a little bit of risk in win now mode for the Vancouver Canucks in years 2 and 3. It's not cost prohibitive. The dollars wasn't really. I just thought with this management group that the premium on a right shot guy, I thought he would get a 2nd year. I was surprised when I saw it was a 3-year deal.
You can't always buy out down the road. And with the cap going up, if there is an acceleration of the cap here, the variable salary will go up as well. So that 3rd year might be escapable.
Well, that might be a lockout year too.
Yeah.
Hate to break it to everyone, but all these contracts are now being structured as though agents and players are guarding against a lockout in that season. Okay, Dakota Joshua, what thinks you, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, that one caught me a little bit off guard just because there really hadn't been much talk around Joshua, and I kind of thought that he was going to test the waters, but I have to imagine that fourth year was what got his attention, that he probably was going to be able to find a team out there that was going to give him 4 years and who knows what kind of money. But when it was the Canucks, and he had stated he wanted to be here, he has thrived under Rick Tocchet. He really has grown up and become an NHLer as a member of the Vancouver Canucks. So I take him at face value that this is where he wanted to be, but it didn't sound like the Canucks had put enough on the table to convince him to put pen to paper. But once they got the Mikheyev deal done, freed up some money, it sounded like they were able to get a fourth year, and at $3.25 million, might he have been able to realize a little bit more money elsewhere, but there is something about being comfortable in your surroundings, in your fit, knowing your role. And this is a good news signing for the Vancouver Canucks. I think there's upside here. This is a guy that scored 18 goals and missed a quarter of the season. So he would have been 20-goal scorer, maybe taking a run at 25 if he had been able to get on any sort of hot streak down the stretch. But there's so much more to Dakota Joshua. I mean, he's one of the most physical players in the National Hockey. Guys, he finished third in the NHL playoffs in hits and played 2 rounds. That says something. I think he was top 10 overall in the regular season, and obviously the penalty killing. And they got Teddy Blueger back. Now they've got Dakota Joshua. They're starting to keep some of the pieces of the puzzle that I think they would have had to chase in free agency, and that was going to come at a cost. The only caveat, and not even a caveat, but I just, with this player, I think it's now about consistency. He's got security, and from years 28 to 32, I think he can return value for the Vancouver Canucks here, doing all the things that he does. But in the playoffs, he had 8 points. 6 of them came in 2 games. And they were game 1 of both of the Nashville and Edmonton series. Like, he got off these incredible starts and then sort of petered out. And for him now, it's, I think too, the start of the season, so many guys got off to hot starts. He was in the doghouse. He was called out by the coach. He was a healthy scratch in San Jose in November. It's, I think, about the long game now for Dakota Joshua. You're in the NHL. You've got this contract. Now it's about just finding a consistency so that you don't go hot and then cold for longer stretches than you'd like to see.
He seems pretty malleable, though. As you mentioned, that beginning of the season adversity, Rick Tocchet sculpted him a little bit, and he responded to it. So he has proven himself to be a coachable player. There were a couple of concerns before these signings that the Canucks had lost a lot of size, or were they going to get size back? And of course, they all wanted to get faster. With Myers and Dakota Joshua, are we mostly satiated on the size thing? Is it just speed now that is the concern going into the rest of free agency?
Yeah, and obviously the Nikita Zadorov story is going to have one more chapter at the very least here, and that would add that much more size. But yeah, I think that they have certainly covered their bases with the signings of Myers and Joshua, that size isn't the issue, that if somehow neither one of those guys had returned. So let's see where it goes from here for the Vancouver Canucks. But we know how much Rick Tocchet likes and values the size, certainly on the back end. And so the Susie Myers pairing will be a thing for the next couple of seasons. And we saw in the playoffs that they can be an effective matchup tool. The size and the length kept opponents like McDavid to the outside. The downside to that pairing, though, is, man, did they tread water, right? Like, they didn't get torched an awful lot, but they spent long shifts in their own zone, barely touching the puck, keeping teams to the perimeter. But it was a struggle just to get the puck out of the zone and then get off the ice. That's a dangerous way to play. And so, this is where I'm kind of curious. You got Hughes and Hronek as this uber pair. And then I'm curious to see how they go about rounding out the rest of the defense core, because they don't have a ton of puck movers. And so if they don't get Zadorov back, what is a plan B there? And what's the prototype of the player that they're looking for that's going to step in there? Could they use more of a puck mover, one more puck mover? Yes. Just think, on the off chance, like, you hope that Quinn Hughes and Filip Hronek are healthy and play all 82 games, but on the off chance that one of those guys misses a stretch, would you like to have somebody else on your roster that could profile a little bit? You're not going to replace those guys, but somebody that you've got the size covered. Now maybe you look for somebody that's a little bit more of a puck mover.
Yeah, left side puck mover would be interesting. So top 6 winger and third pair left shot defenseman, Jeff, are those the 2 priorities as you see it here?
Yeah, obviously the scoring winger, and we know that they've made their intentions clear on Gensel, and we'll see what kind of other offers he gets and how that all plays out. I'm curious about a plan B. Is it Toffoli? Is it Jake DeBrusk? Is it an Anthony Duclair? Is it a combination of the lesser players? And with all due respect, they're not Jake Gensel. Is there somebody else lurking in the weeds? Toivo Teravainen. There's some interesting candidates out there, certainly. So we'll see how things play out. And then I do think now they're looking at, a depth defenseman. And I don't think they've closed the door to Zadorov. They've got the weekend here. They've got a little bit of money. And it's just a question of, who's going to blink and how is that ultimately going to play out. But they have to be nimble. They've got to be ready to go. And I think that this management group has shown that they will be ready to go. And that's where the confidence in the fan base comes in compared to the previous regime on July 1st, where people freaked out. And was it Ray that said, best move would just be to take the GM's phone away? I don't think people feel that way about this management group. It's all about win now. They're aggressive. We've seen that. This week is more proof of that. The curious one to me, guys, was this report of doubling back on Casey DeSmith. Like, I just thought that door was closed entirely. And I do wonder if that is a negotiating ploy to get the attention of Artur Silovs to sign a team-friendly deal as a restricted free agent. If you want to be in the National Hockey League, take this deal. Otherwise, we may have no choice but to go and find a little bit of security that sort of would serve as an impediment to your path, the straight line to a full-time job in the National Hockey League. So I was surprised. I just thought from the DeSmith camp as well, like, it didn't end well. Obviously, he lost his job, didn't get a chance to get back in the net. I kind of thought that he would want to explore options elsewhere.
Well, I think that was fuel for a Silovs trade, but I just don't see that. There's just not much of a market for that particular.
You don't think so?
Level of a goalie.
Well, I was going to ask Jeff if given that report about DeSmith or a veteran goalie, and if you're all in, I mean, Silovs the value's pretty high now. Do you owe it to yourself to explore a trade there?
It's possible. I mean, this team doesn't have many trade chips, 25
right.
First rounder and a goaltender, I suppose. I mean, those are, and so if I know Irf Gafar has reported that the Canucks have their eye on an unnamed RFA. And I was like, how are you going to go about making something happen here? They don't have enough draft capital of their own to offer sheet. And we know that offer sheets generally don't pan out anyways. So that leaves you with the trade route. And you have to be realistic. There aren't enough prospects in the pipeline that you can, offer up to other teams that are really going to get their attention, especially if you're trying to land a sizable fish coming in return. And Artur Silovs now with a bit of a body of work, certainly high leverage playoff hockey, showed that he can hold his own. I think he's ready to be a full-time National Hockey Leaguer. So I am kind of intrigued by these reports and ultimately what is his path forward here. And is it as a member of the Vancouver Canucks?
If you're looking for a young goalie, Skarov might have just jumped onto the market as well.
Well,
so fair enough.
Not to mention their, the goalie market has already been interesting and could get more interesting from here. Last question, Jeff. It's our poll question, but who do you want in free agency? Gensel, Tanev, Zadorov, somebody else? Who do you think would fit best, work best?
I think if you're all in and it is win now, I think you got to step to the plate and take your best swing at Jake Gensel on Monday and see if you can land that player, a 2-time 40-goal scorer, proven playoff scorer, guy that has familiarity with the coaching staff, with management. I think he'd be a natural fit here. Lindholm's not coming back. There's a spot on that top unit power play that seems to have his name written all over it. Would he be the bumper answer as a left shot guy? Not saying he's Bo Horvat, but they were lacking a left shot guy in the middle of the ice on the power play. Jake Gensel certainly would seem to fit that role as well. So, again, I see all the smoke around Chris Tanev, and I have nothing but the most respect for Chris Tanev. Always enjoyed my dealings with him, watching him. But I do wonder, you've just brought back a soon-to-be 35-year-old Tyler Myers. How much do you want to commit term and dollars to a 34-year-old Chris Tanev? Brendan Dillon's in that same boat. Yeah. So I get that it's the here and now, and then you deal with the back end of those contracts later. And certainly if you have a Stanley Cup to show for it, then it was worth it in the end. But there's a lot of ground to travel for the Vancouver Canucks between this and getting their hands on a Stanley Cup. So I am a little wary of just the veterans that feel like they're either approaching or maybe even past their peak performance days. One maybe, but I don't know that I have an appetite to see the Canucks load up on a bunch of 34-year-old defensemen.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying on Tanev. Dylan, I think, is going to come in at less term, but yeah. Big day Monday, Jeff. We'll talk to you then.
All right, guys, have a great weekend.
Thank you. Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.